Hey everybody, this is Seth Parnell, minister at the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 117 of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope that you are doing well. Hope that you're having a wonderful week so far. It's Labor Day weekend, and so if you have plans with your family, I hope those do well, and you have a wonderful time out there. And stay safe, stay hydrated, and have a lot of make a lot of good memories. Have a good time out there. We appreciate you stopping by here. If you're someone who is seen us for the first time, if you're someone who watches pretty regularly, we want you to know that we appreciate you and we thank you for taking time out of your schedule to study with us and to grow with us. And we love having you here, and so appreciate you. We always want to let you know that at Portia, you always have an invitation to come and visit us. Right now, we are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock for Sunday morning services. 10 o'clock, we have a class on, it's going to be on Ephesians, I think. We're just changing books, but I think it's going to be on Ephesians Sunday. And then we have a worship service at 11, and then Sunday night at 5 o'clock, and on Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock. And so we're having a class on the book of Matthew on Wednesday. We're slowly working through that book, kind of taking time to get through a lot of the good details, and so it's been a good study so far. And so I hope you know that you're always welcome to come see us in that regard. Also, if you ever have any questions or comments about what we studied tonight, about the things that we cover, if you have any suggestions for future episodes, please feel free to get in contact with us. We'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear what you had to say. And because it's always good to hear back from people. But tonight is obviously this is a single episode, and so we're going to be a little bit shorter than usual tonight. But I think we still got some good stuff to look at. We're going to look at Psalm chapter 28. Psalm chapter 28. Now, this is sometimes a psalm that is a little bit overshadowed, maybe a little bit by the psalm that comes before it. The previous psalm. If you remember, Psalm chapter 27 is, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Probably by far the most famous, psalm, in the book, or in the book of Psalms, or really, Psalm 27 is the Lord is my light, and salvation. Psalm 23 is the Lord is my shepherd. To get that right there, but that psalm is definitely the most well known, and it has, of course, you hear it read in sermons, you hear it read at funerals a lot. It's a very, very comforting passage, and so it's used there quite a bit. But it's something that kind of provides an insight into David, the one who wrote a lot of these early psalms. He wrote Psalm 28, as well. And it kind of puts you in line with what they're going through. How are they feeling? What are the things that are troubling them? They have. It was a difficult life. That David had. It was a difficult time that he had. He had a lot of problems that he had to go through. A lot of life and death situations. I mean, if you just take the life of David, from from where you first run into him with David and Goliath, and you fast forward to even well after he is king, after he's been king for some time. The amount of life and death situations that David is in is quite plentiful. He was someone, excuse me, he's someone who has often found himself in danger. And we find, of course, him being someone who would challenge, the giant Goliath. You would expect that from him. He was in danger there, but yet God pulled him through that. We know that Saul hunted him, for a long period of time. Night and day, Saul hunted for him in order to try to take his life. And he fought, the Philistines. He had to run from the Philistines. So his own son would drive him out of Jerusalem. If you remember, Absalom, created a rebellion and drove, David out of the city. And so it was David. He had a lot of life and death situations, but he was also a very a very artistic person. He was very fluent, with his poetry and with his music, which was one of the reasons why he got into the service of Saul in the first place. Because when he played the harp, it kind of soothed, the soul of Saul, and so he wasn't as angry, or he wasn't as upset as he usually was. And so David, he was someone who had that artistic value about him, and so when he is writing these psalms, you can see that come out along with the emotion that he has within him, and we can see that on display here in the first couple of verses in this the psalm that's entitled "The Lord is my strength and my shield." And in verse 1, it says, "To you, O Lord, I call, my rock. Be not deaf to me, lest if you be silent to me, I become like those who go down to the pit. Hear the voice of my pleas for mercy, when I cry for you to help, when I lift up my hands toward your most holy sanctuary." David is someone who, even though he went through all these things, and he went through, all of these life and death situations, he was someone who was almost fully dependent upon God and depended upon his protection, on his blessings that he gave him. Because he says here in verse 1, he says, he refers to him, he says, "I call on you, Lord," and he refers to him as his rock. And he says, "Do not be deaf, lest if you be silent to me, I become like those who go down to the pit," which is basically those who suffer, or those who are brought low, or those who are defeated, or those who die. Those are the people who go down to the pit. And so David is saying, "Lord, if you are with me, if you are someone that hears my cry, I know I'm going to be protected. I know I'm going to be all right. But if you don't listen to me, if you are deaf to my call, then I'm going to end up like those people who have been defeated, who have been put down." David saw a clear line between his success and between his failure. He knew that if God heard his call, he would have success. If God refused to hear him, then he would have failure. He would be like one who would be defeated. And so he again says, "You hear the voice of my pleas for mercy, and when I cry for you for help, when I lift my hands toward your most holy sanctuary." David was someone who he didn't just expect God to kind of swoop in and take care of him, but he's someone who was made sure he upheld his end of the bargain as well. He says that he pleaded to God for mercy. He cried to him for help. He lifted up his hands towards his holy sanctuary. These are all the things that David did in order to entreat God for his blessing. Sometimes when we take a look at our relationship with God and the blessings that we have, sometimes we are a people that don't like to ask for help. I know I'm one of those people. I'm not really too keen on asking for help sometimes when I should. And a lot of people are like that. And sometimes we don't want to pray to God. We don't want to cry out to God unless it's absolutely necessary, unless it's something that is absolutely life or death situation, like David faced a lot of the time. It is, we don't like we like to handle things on our own. That's a natural human tendency to have. We like to do things ourselves, handle things on our own. That's how we like to go forward a lot. But even though David was considered a mighty warrior, someone who killed thousands of Philistines, someone who fought the giant, he had so much military success, but yet even this guy says, "Lord, if you are silent to me, if you are someone that does not hear my call, I'm done. I am no good." We need to be a people that are comfortable in asking God for help, in imploring the mercy of God, because He is someone who looks after us. He's someone who can care for us, but we've got to do our end of the part. We have to be someone who actually, asked for help, and someone who asks you for his forgiveness and his mercy, because he stands ready to provide it if we're someone who is willing to ask for it. And David knew that, and he's someone who said, Lord, you do not refuse my plea. In verse 3, he continues on. He says, "Do not drag me off with the wicked, with the workers of evil, who speak peace with their neighbors, while evil is in their hearts. Give to them according to their work, and according to the evil of their deeds. Give to them according to the work of their hands. Render them their due reward, because they do not regard the works of the Lord or the work of his hands. He will tear them down and build them up no more." And in verse 3, he continues to this plea to God, for support and for deliverance. He says, "Don't drag me off with the wicked. Don't place me in association, with the wicked." He understands that there is a judgment. There is going to be a time in which God calls all people into account. And he says, "Don't place me with those people. Don't place me, with the wicked and drag me off. But give people, the due reward, for their works, the due reward, for what they have done." He says, "Give to them according to the work of their hands," verse 4, "and render them their due reward." David didn't want to be placed, in the camp, of the evildoers, but he was someone who wanted to let God know that he stood apart, that he stood against, evil, and he was someone who stood up before righteousness and stood up before what God, stands for. And he said, "Don't misplace me, because I know what's going to happen to those people, and I don't want to have any part of that. But you, Lord, you can take care of me in this regard." And so he says, "Give them according to their work." But in verse 3, he says, like I said, "Do not drag me off with the wicked and with the workers of evil," saying that statement. And he says, "Who speaks peace with their neighbors while evil is in their hearts." That's usually one of the first signs of a person that is that has that attitude, or has that sinful kind of mindset. Someone who speaks peace, but in their heart, they don't have it. Someone who may say one thing and do another. What do we call that? We usually refer to that as hypocrisy. We know that Jesus had some very, very strong words for people who embraced that type of practice. For the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they had to deal with that, and Jesus didn't care for that. And so people who speak peace but mean ill intent, that's a characteristic that David puts to the workers of evil, and the wicked. And so sometimes we have to be careful. We can't always take everything that we hear to heart. It would be awesome. It would be great if everyone had good intentions and everyone meant the best for you. But even when it comes to religious things, even when it comes to the Bible and to studies in that regard, we can't always believe everything that we hear. But we have to take time in order to study it. We have to take time to investigate it, to see whether it is true or whether it is not, whether it's something that is worthy of being followed or whether it is something that should be rejected. We have to have that willingness to investigate and to make sure that it is true, because there will be people out there who will speak those good things, but their intention is something that is far worse. Paul would refer to these types of people as, I believe it was Paul who would refer to these types of people as wolves in sheep's clothing. People who on the outside look really good, but on the inside they simply do not align with what God wants. And that is one of the characteristics, as it says, of an evildoer. And so we have to be careful with that. And when we know that we're going to it's a a very well-known principle, that has been given, for throughout the Gospels, is that a person's going to get out what they put into something. And so he says, give to them according to the work and according to the evil of their deeds. Give them according to the work of their hands, and render them their due reward, because they do not regard the works of the Lord or the works of his hands. And he will tear them down and build them up no more. You remember what Jesus says about reaping and sowing? Whatever a man sows, that's what he's going to reap as well. And so it's definitely an idea. It's definitely something, that a concept that goes all throughout Christianity, that we have to be cognizant that we are going to get out what we put in. If we build something up that is a sinful, if we build sinful characteristics, and that's what we're going to get out of it. But if we're someone who builds up a righteousness, if we build up in truth and in love, that's what we're going to get out of that. We're going to see the results of the work of our hands. And so we have to ask the question, what are we working for? What are we working towards? What are we working with? We have to ask those questions, because if we're going to receive the results of what we work for, then those are definitely worthy questions to consider. Because if we're someone that is not working at all, if we're someone that is working towards something that is apart from God, then eventually we're going to get that result. And so it's always good to take a look at just what we are working towards, what we are working with. Because if we can answer those questions, and it's a question that only you can answer, with the knowledge of your personal life and with yourself. No one. It's hard for someone else in order to tell you, those things. But if you answer that question honestly, you can. That can be a big benefit for you in regards to looking after your future. And because if we're going to get the results of our work, we want to be working for good. And David was certainly someone who did that. But he's going to finish out this psalm here in verse 6, where he says, "Blessed be the Lord, for he has heard the voice of my pleas for mercy. And the Lord is my strength and my shield. In him my heart trusts, and I am helped. My heart exults, and with my song I give thanks to him. The Lord is the strength of his people, and he is the saving refuge of his anointed. O save your people, and bless your heritage. Be their shepherd, and carry them forever." He finished. It's interesting when you look at this psalm and you see kind of the differences between verses 6 and verse 1, where he says, "To you, O Lord, I call, my rock, be not deaf to me, lest if you be silent to me, I become like those who go down to the pit." And then in verse 6, he says, "Blessed be the Lord, for he has heard the voice of my pleas for mercy." It's almost like, David, was in a tough spot. He was in one of those rough situations, and he wrote the first part of the psalm, and then God delivered him, and God, took him out of that bad place. And what happens? He is delivered, from that. And he writes the verses 6, and following, where he says, "Blessed be the Lord, for he has heard the voice, of my pleas for mercy. The Lord is my strength and my shield." That's where the title of the psalm comes. The Lord is my strength and the Lord is my shield. And he refers to God as his strength, several times in this psalm. In verse 7, he refers to him as strength. In verse 8, he refers to him as the strength of his people. He calls him his rock in verse 28. And so, or not verse 28, in chapter 28, in verse 1. And so this was something that David knew. He knew that God was his strength. He was the power behind him as he sought to move forward. And he called him his strength and his shield. If you think about a soldier, what's two things that a soldier has to have? If we're talking about a medieval or a ancient soldier, if he has a shield, he has to be someone who protects himself, and he has to be someone who has enough strength in order to attack, the enemy. And so David says, God, you give me both. You give me a shield to protect me, and you give me the strength, to fight back. And that's how he looked at God. And we know that that's something that God can be for us too as well. He can be our shield, can be our protection, and he can give us the strength to go forward. Because God can do a lot of things if we're someone who puts our trust in him. And he says that he's not only the strength for him, but also the strength of his people, as he says there in verse 8. The Lord is the strength of his people. He's a saving refuge of his anointed. And so that's why, as David says here, that's why he gives thanks to God. That's why he praises God, for what he means to him. And so when we look at God, and when you look at your relationship with God, and I think a lot of times we see God in different ways, but we see him as our Father. We see him as someone who is the God, the Creator, the God of the universe, the one who created all this earth. But we also can see him as David saw him here, as a strength, and as our strength, and as our shield. Because when you think about how we fight sin, how we fight those things that separate us from God, if we're someone who sought to fight against sin, and we did not have God on our side, if we didn't have the sacrifice of Jesus to help us, how far would we get? How much progress could we make? Could we be someone who could overcome sin by ourselves? I think the answer is a resounding no. We would not have the strength in order to overcome sin without Jesus. But because of the strength that God provides us, we can overcome sin. We can be someone who is free. And we can be someone who looks forward to that bright future that has promises that God has given us. And so the fact that he strengthens us and that he gives us those things is something that is truly to be admired. Because a lot of times in this crazy world, we could use a little bit of strength. We could use a little bit of defense, a little bit of protection. We can use those things, because sometimes this world can knock us around pretty good. Sometimes it can beat us up a few times, and we can use that strength that God provides. And David knew this, and in the tumultuous life that he had, he knew that he had to have God to get forward. And I think Psalm chapter 28 certainly proves this, certainly something that highlights the way that David saw God. And I think that gives us kind of an example. It gives us a way in which we can see God as well. Because if we can be someone who sees him in this regard, sees him as our strength and our shield, that's a big step forward. And I think it's something that certainly speaks well of what God does and what he is all about. But I think that's probably about all that we have here tonight. Let me check here. Something else here. Yeah, I think that's about all we got here tonight. But we appreciate everyone watching and everyone who stopped by tonight. Like I said, it's a little bit shorter episode tonight, but I hope that you have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. If you're going out with your family and you're going out and having a get together or something, then I hope you enjoy that and that you have a pleasant and good time. And because it's always a good thing when you can get together with friends and family and celebrate. And so we hope that you have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. But until next time, we hope that you go out and be the light of the world and glorify God in everything that you do. We'll catch you next time.